race weekends plus world championships. And most years, those are at the same venues. So for example, the May rounds, the 2 rounds in May, those are almost always in the Czech Republic and in a town called Albstadt, Germany. And those courses have changed very minimally in the last 5 years. So we show up to those and we know what to expect. We know the obstacles we have to get over. We know the flow of it and the rhythm. But every year there's probably 1 or 2 either new venues or venues that have restructured their course. So we show up the week of the race and we have to learn it, which is a unique thing in our sport. I mean, in hockey, it's the same rink every time.
Yep.
But ours is an open sport. So that means that it's just, you're always working in a different environment. We're very impacted by, even the same course can be a drastically different course if it's muddy versus if it's dry. And then on top of those World Cups, we will generally race probably 10 race weekends that would just be international races, but not on the World Cup. So you would race those for points to improve your start position at the World Cups, and also to just for race experience and for improvement. And those courses are almost always unknown to us.
And I would think one of the most unique courses you've ever raced was at the Epic Israel race. I read the blog about that and I heard about this, but tell our audience for the first time, what was it like racing in Israel? What was that whole experience like for you?
It was the coolest life experience ever. It's not an Olympic discipline, this style of racing. It's stage racing. So it's not strictly something that well, it's a sort of a separate stream from the Olympics, but it's my favorite style of racing. And so stage racing, it's usually between 3 and 8 days. And obviously each day is a different course. Most of them are marathon distance, between 2 and 6 hours. And Epic Israel was 4 days we were racing in Northern Galilee, and it was just incredible. I don't think I would have ever had the opportunity to go there or to see that terrain and otherwise. And it was very different, and it was hard. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. The first day was a time trial, and we raced in pairs. Forgot to mention that, but you had to race in a team of 2. So you have to start at the same time as each other and cross the finish line together as well. And I have never exploded so hard as I did in that first stage. It was 35 degrees and I was so dehydrated, and I can remember cresting one climb and I hit the highest heart rate I've ever seen in my life. And it was just lights out after that. My partner had to drag me to the finish line. But somehow over the next 3 days after that, we clawed back enough time to win the overall. So that was pretty cool. But it was a huge event there. It was close to 1,000 racers, and it was just a wildlife experience.
That's awesome. I'm glad you mentioned that you finished first, or else I was going to pull that out of you.
I'm not to brag, but I'm quite, stage racing is something I excel at. And until this past year, I had never lost a stage race. So it's something I like to do for sure. I did one this in February of 2020, right before everything shut down. And it was the first one I lost, and I had a triple flat tire on day 1. So it was too much time lost to overcome. But stage racing I like it a lot.
Now, I'll shift gears a little bit. You're both using bikes, you're both racing, but can you compare and contrast the road cyclists to the mountain bikers? Is there a rivalry? Is it just 2 completely different sports and you just ignore each other?
I think there's a lot of mutual respect. I think people tend to think that road racers must be a lot more fit than mountain bikers. But I think if you look at the top, if you took the power profiles of the top athletes in both road and mountain and the hours they accumulate, it would be very comparable. Road racing is, because their events are longer, it is a slightly less intense sport. It's more aerobic. So you could think of them more like marathon runners. Whereas mountain biking, if you looked at the output in a mountain bike race in terms of power, so the amount of force through your pedals, it's very on-off. it's very anaerobic because we're sprinting up these extremely steep hills and then we're going downhill and not pedaling. And you do that very frequently throughout each lap. And so mountain bikers, I think, would be more anaerobically inclined. So you'd see them be, it's more of like a power sport. Like, I keep bringing up hockey because that's what I grew up with, but it's more similar to hockey or to those burst sports as opposed to more of a steady state sport. But like I said, there's a lot of mutual respect. I would love to try road racing, and you see a lot of crossover. Road athletes tend to excel in mountain biking if they have the technical skill, and vice versa. But they are very different, and we have very little like contact with the road racers. We don't really train together. We're focusing on very different things and very different styles of fitness. So
I'm glad to hear that mutual respect exists, because both sports seem incredibly challenging and difficult for the amateur cyclist.
Yeah, and well, any sport you do, anything you do is really hard at the top end of it, at the most elite level of performance. But there's a certain type of suffering that comes on two wheels that I haven't been able to replicate anywhere else.
At least for the stationary bikes, they sell more of a padded seat. So I don't know if you have that, but
we do not have a more padded seat. But thankfully, in mountain biking, there's a lot of standing, so it's not so bad.
So I'm going to switch gears again to the upcoming games. And of course, we're still in the midst of the pandemic. And the question that just came in is if you can discuss some of the prep that's being done as relates to COVID. What has the Olympic Committee told you? What have you done personally? If you can share anything with us.
So we are getting communication from the COC on how to proceed. And all last year, the directive from the COC was not to aim for peak performance in 2020. Pretty much all national sport federations, so cycling, track, rowing, they were all advised not to count anything that did happen in 2020 towards selection. So the emphasis was really on allowing athletes to train safely at home and to not have to travel and compete. So that was very welcome. It was a very proactive response by the COC that we didn't see other countries necessarily taking. There were a lot of athletes who did have pressure to travel and to compete in other countries because their federations weren't maybe as they just took a different tactic than Canada did. But heading forwards now that we're in 2021 and it looks like Tokyo will happen, there's a lot going on in the background that thankfully we don't have to be involved in as athletes, if that makes sense. So every month we're given an update by the COC that says, this is what's happening, this is where we're at, this is all you need to worry about. So in terms of vaccines, we don't know whether we'll be vaccinated before the games, but we do know how the village will run, like the bubbles that will be established. We know entry times into Japan, so it'll be a much tighter time in the village. So you won't be allowed to travel. No outside personnel allowed in the athletes' living area. We wouldn't be able to go watch other sports, for example. So there's a lot of, they've taken care of all of the restrictions around logistics and how we can minimize contacts with each other. And then in terms of specific COVID prep, I think it's every federation is taking their own strategy. But for cycling specifically, it's been training alone or training in just a group of people that you live with. And for me, I'm lucky that my husband is also training in the same sport as me, so I always have a training partner, which is great.
Is he as good as you?
He's faster than me. So I always
doesn't answer the question.
He excels in different things than me right now. So he is not likely to make the Olympic team, but he really excels in the longer distance stuff and the stage racing. So he actually also has raced Epic Israel twice and finished on the podium there.
But not first?
Not first. He didn't win, so I do hold that over him.
And that's why you're the guest tonight and he's not.
He's pretty good. I have to hand it to him.
And I will note that you did get married last year, so mazel tov.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's great news. You mentioned that the games will be a bit different, that you won't be able to watch your fellow Team Canada athletes compete. Do you think that's going to take away a little bit from the Olympic experience, that camaraderie might not be there like it normally would?
Well, luckily for me, it will be my first one, so I won't be comparing it to anything. I mean, I have an experience at Commonwealth Games, but that's quite a bit scaled down. It's a much smaller thing, so I don't think it'll take away from it for me because I won't know what I'm missing. I think though that it makes me really want to go to Paris 2024 so that I can share the experience with my family. They obviously won't be able to go to Tokyo if I'm selected. There no international spectators will be permitted. So it'll be different, but I think it will. The real thrill for me of an Olympic Games is pulling on the maple leaf. And if I get to go, that won't change. That's still what I'm there to do, and it'll be something I'll remember forever.
So we've had a few Olympians on who've talked to us about wearing the maple leaf at the games. But since you technically haven't been selected yet, what's it going to be like? What's going to go through your mind when you get the call or you get that confirmation that you actually have made the team?
I just got shivers thinking about it. It's every time it's actually hilarious. It will come in the form of an email. It doesn't come as a phone call or a formal letter.
Better not go to spam.
Email, which seems so anticlimactic. But every time I think about getting that email, I find it hard not to cry. It's my Olympic dream has grown as I've grown. And 10 years ago, this wasn't a dream because I didn't even entertain it as a possibility. But every single year, I've developed a little bit more belief in myself and a little bit more optimism about what could be possible. And now it's something that it sort of ignites every fiber of my being. And it would just be the feeling that it couldn't be replicated by anything else. I don't know if I'll even know how to process it if I do get to go. But at the same time, it is just the Olympics, and life is not just about the Olympics. So if it doesn't happen, I know I'll be okay, and I know the journey has been worth it because without this pursuit, I would not be who I am. I wouldn't have grown into who I am. But yeah, man, pulling on that maple leaf, I'll have to do that privately in my own room with no cameras watching the first time I do it.
We would love the exclusive if you want to share the video with us.
It'll be an emotional reaction.
I'm sure it will be, and so hopeful that happens sooner than later. I'm going to also note that March is Women's Empowerment Month, and you do a lot of work inspiring and working with young female athletes. Can you tell us a little bit about that? It's Fast and Forward, I believe the organization is called, right?
Yeah, it's called Fast and Female.
Sorry.
That was started by a Canadian Olympian named Chandra Crawford. She lives in Canmore, and she's an Olympic gold medalist in cross-country skiing. And that organization is her brainchild, and her mission for that was shaped by the fact that girls quit sports at a rate astronomically higher than boys for many reasons. And she just wanted to keep girls involved in sports as long as possible because we know about the positive physical health outcomes, the social health outcomes, mental health outcomes that are associated with sport involvement and with sport pursuit. And so many of our nation's girls are missing out on that. And I know for me, sports have been my life, and I could not imagine my life without them. So I think that, yeah, I mean, the mission of keeping girls involved in sports is really important to me. And I don't have to do a lot to act on that because Chandra has created this organization that does so much of the work. So thankfully, I can just volunteer at events when they're hosted and do my best to raise awareness other than that. But yeah, especially with cycling. I mean, mountain biking is it's so empowering as a woman. If I imagine not ever having mountain biked, I don't know if I would have the courage to go to places overseas alone. I find myself out on my bike in the woods way out, way away from civilization, all by myself, and I'm confident and comfortable out there. And that's sport has given me that. It's given me that sense of self-efficacy and stability. And yeah, I think that if we can make more girls feel more comfortable in who they are and improve their health outcomes and improve their confidence, then it's everyone wins.
So I got to ask the question: if it weren't for mountain biking, where would Haley Smith be today?
I don't know. I sometimes ask myself that question, and I worry that like you said when we started, mountain biking is a very obscure sport, and sometimes I worry that I have imposter syndrome. So I worry that maybe I'm only good at mountain biking because it is a small sport. But I think if I weren't pursuing life on two wheels, it would have been something else as at a high of a level as I was capable of pursuing. I grew up in dance and hockey, and those were my first loves. And had I not gotten sick, I definitely think I would have pursued dance as a career path or something in the arts, if not a dancer, somehow involved in it. But it's a hard question to answer, and I will eventually have to answer it because I won't be bike racing forever. But I don't know what that'll look like right now.
Well, I can always use a co-host.
I think I have a degree in kinesiology. I made sure I finished my degree before I became full-time bike racer, and I can see myself being involved in some type of holistic approach to health management for people, whether it's physiotherapy or mental health consultation or something like that. But who knows?
I just want to share with the audience a quote that you wrote on your blog. Relates more to the question we had before, but it's beautiful. I dream of a world where more people feel confident to reach towards their goals, a world where women are empowered to engage in all types of business and physical activity, and a world where movement has become mainstream medicine. I believe that we all have the potential to achieve our dreams. We just need to build the confidence to reach them. That's pretty profound. So you might have a career in journalism too.
Maybe. I do love to write, and it's always been a very cathartic thing for me. And it seems I struggle a little bit because it seems very self-indulgent to assume that people care what I have to think or say. But I do love to write. So.
That's awesome. I'm going to bring in another question I got via email. Back to your training, how do you fuel your body? You mentioned you eat multiple times a day. So what are typical meals like for you?
Yeah, so this is something that I have historically struggled with, obviously because of my history with an eating disorder. And eating disorders are quite a common thing in endurance sports, but usually they're precipitated by the sport, or they develop as an athlete goes through their sport. And for me, it was the other way. I came into the sport already having had this issue. So it's something I have to be very aware of, and I have to be very mindful of my fueling because it's really easy for me to under fuel, which is really bad for health, but also it's just puts paid to any notion of performing. So the keys for me are a high focus on carbohydrate, which is very contrary to current dietary trends. So it's kind of hard to resist that all the media telling us we should eat more protein and eat way less carbs. For me, I know I need to eat a lot of carbs. So fueling for my sport, I eat 6 times a day, 3 larger meals usually, and a few snacks. And I also eat on the bike. So any session that's longer than 90 minutes, we'll be eating on the bike. And before and after training are primarily carbohydrate. So whether it's, I've been making a lot of sourdough in the pandemic. So whether it's bread or pasta or quinoa or potatoes, lots of complex carbohydrates in training. And then I just try to eat as whole foods as possible all the other times of the day. So lots of vegetables. I don't eat vegetarian, but I would say probably very close to fully pescatarian. So lots of fish and eggs. And just as balanced of a diet as I can, and just making sure that I'm really it's better to be, if it's even possible to be overfueled as an athlete, it's better to be overfueled than even a smidge underfueled. So it's a high focus for me.
Is your husband responsible for keeping that sourdough starter going while you're at the Olympics?
We don't know what we're going to do with it. And it's honestly a source of contention because I don't want it to die. It's been alive for over a year now, but I think I'll have to look up how to preserve it in the freezer so we can come home to the starter still being alive.
I guess we have priorities, and that's definitely one of them.
Yes.
I'll bring in a question from Facebook now. I'll call this segment Weird Questions by My Wife. Do you have a Peloton? And if so, who's your favorite instructor?
I don't have a Peloton, but I think it's so great that that's taken off in the pandemic. I love that people are exploring that as a way to stay fit. And I have a lot of friends actually that have jumped on that train and they're really enjoying it. But when I do have to train indoors, I just put my road bike on what's called a smart trainer. So it's my actual bike hooked up to a mechanism that attaches to the rear wheel. And we race on a virtual platform, or we train on a virtual platform called Zwift. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
Yep.
But it's kind of like a video game for bikes, and it's really fun. But no Peloton, yes to Zwift.
Do you think the fact that Peloton, Echelon, these bikes are taken off now, that will inspire a next generation of mountain bikers or road cyclists?
I don't know, because I don't know how different they are. For example, my sports psychologist loves Zwift. She loves to ride indoors on her trainer on the virtual platform, but is less keen on riding outside for cars, and just she's comfortable just going to her garage to ride. And there's a lower barrier to starting because you don't have to get fully kitted up and head outside and have to, or for many people, drive to a trail system.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I don't know if it'll translate to more in real life cyclists, but it's making people healthier and it's giving people more outlets to exercise and to be active. So, I mean, if you pedal a bike, whether it's inside or outside, you're a cyclist. So that's all that really matters in my book.
Awesome. So we've only got a couple minutes left, and one of my final questions for you, I took it from your blog. You once wrote that you hope to find your best self. Have you found your best self?
Not yet. I think, well, progress is not linear. We all know that. That classic graphic that shows what people expect success to look like as a upwards trajectory, and then what success actually looks like is like this, and eventually you start to go up. And that's what my experience is like. So sometimes I feel like I'm moving towards my best self, and other times I have setbacks, and I've had some major setbacks in the last year with mental health issues brought on by the pandemic. And that's why biking is still fulfilling for me, because I'm chasing a moving target, which is, the idea of my best self. It is a moving target, and it's going to evolve and look different every day that I'm alive, because I'm never the same person 2 days in a row. None of us are. We're always growing. So I have not yet found my best self, but I've found enough glimpses of what that could look like that I'm motivated to keep trying, if that makes sense.
Definitely does. Do you think your best self will eventually come when you're retired, when you're settled in with your wife, your husband, perhaps with kids in the future? Or do you think that the athlete Haley Smith is going to be the pinnacle?
I think I hope to keep improving my whole life well after my athletic career is done. But I think the attitude that I've learned and the way of approaching life that I've learned through sport, which is to strive for improvement, for better, for just to strive for more out of myself. That's an attitude that comes from sport, but can be applied to anything in life. And I think if I can hold on to that as I move on to the next phases of my life, I think it's a recipe for constant or continual improvement, not constant. So that, yeah, I hope I'll just be able to bring that mindset to whatever comes next.
That's absolutely awesome. Haley, I just want to thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for you in Victoria, BC. Wish you the best of luck leading up to the Olympic Games, and I can't wait for you to share that video with us as the exclusive when you get the email from Team Canada that you finally made it. We'll all be cheering you on in Tokyo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and for the conversation.
Of course. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining Frontline Access tonight. Please tune in after Passover when we have a great lineup of guests. A happy Passover, happy Easter to everyone watching. Have a great evening.